And here she is on my dead shortwave. Rachel Richards is here. How are you?
Hey, Joe. I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic, as we pretend that we're doing this for the first time, because the first time I didn't press record.
Yeah.
But luckily we didn't get that far in. So you are known as the money honey, but I can't call you that because the Ramones and we think of Maria Bartiromo as the money honey. So do you get that comparison a lot, that people confuse the two of you?
You know, I don't. And she's for sure the OG, but I don't. And I think it's because I work with mostly Gen Z and millennials, and they don't know who she is.
They got no idea. Well, I think it's a great comparison anyway, right? If they do, you're like, hey, that's fantastic.
Yes, for sure.
Not bad. So I'm going to ask the impolite question right away. They say you don't talk about different things. And one is you don't ask people their age, right? How old are you? So let's start there.
Yes, I'm 29 and totally okay to ask me because I think it's relevant to the story, but I'm 29 years old.
It totally is when people see where we're headed. How many pieces of real estate do you own now?
My husband and I built a real estate portfolio of 38 doors by the time I was 26 years old. And we own less than that now because we've sold a few buildings.
Why did you sell?
We sold because we got to a point in our real estate investing journey where time was more important than money. So I think starting out as a new investor, you typically have less money and you have more time. So you're willing to hustle and go out there and find good deals and even self-manage your properties starting out. And I think that's an important thing. And then later on, as you get more and more units, you're forced to delegate. Maybe the money that you're making is not as important to you anymore. And it becomes about protecting your most valuable resource, which is your time. So we got to this point with our rentals where it was definitely becoming a hassle. We've mostly self-managed, and that's part of the reason. So we did look into just hiring a property manager versus selling. And my thought was, I started learning about real estate syndications. And I was like, well, let's sell the properties. And then we can transition the equity from those into real estate syndications, which is much more passive. And then we have the best of both worlds.
That's funny. This theme of passive income, for people that don't know you, they have no idea that that's what we're going to be talking about for the next 20 minutes because you're fascinated by that. You said in an interview somewhere, Rachel, that you were reading finance books in high school. You were a money nerd in high school?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've been a money nerd my whole life. One of the first ones I read that turned me onto real estate investing was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It's funny because you see him now, right? And all the controversy that he's had. Do you feel differently about him now than you did when you first read it?
You know, I am a fan of, I guess, the book more so than him. And, you know, I could say the same thing about Dave Ramsey. I'm a fan of certain things that Dave Ramsey teaches. And then you get to a point where you kind of have to graduate from that and learn how to use debt as leverage so that you can build true wealth. So I think we can learn important things from these people. They don't necessarily need to be people that we look up to anymore. If that makes sense.
It does. And who turned you on to that book in high school? Because I can't imagine, you know, at 14, 15 or whatever age you were when you read it, you're like, hey, let's go hang out in the money section. Like, where did that gene come from?
I don't know. I don't remember who turned it on to me, but I was even reading finance books in middle school. I read The Intelligent Investor in high school. I mean, I was totally into learning about the stock market and all these different things, even at a pretty young age.
Was it then the Intelligent Investor, obviously more about stocks and bonds? Was it Robert Kiyosaki then that made you kind of go, you know what, I'm going to lead with real estate versus stocks?
Yes, I think something with real estate investing clicked for me because I was putting together these pieces of a puzzle. And the puzzle was passive income. Like passive income is the ultimate solution. And you're right. I'm obsessed with the concept. And when I learned about real estate investing and how you can make ongoing cash flow and build up wealth and equity in the long term, I was like, wow, there's so many different benefits here. I mean, when you invest in real estate, there's 4 benefits. There's cash flows, passive income. There is equity buildup because your tenants are paying your mortgage for you over time. So after 30 years, you own a property free and clear, having only paid the down payment. There's tax benefits, depreciation being a huge one. And number 4, which I always count as a bonus, is appreciation. Properties don't always appreciate, but when they do, that's even more equity that you have. So when I saw that compared to stock market investing, I was like, real estate investing is my way out of the rat race. This is my path to financial independence. And I think investing in the stock market is important as well. You need to be diversified. But I think that with real estate investing, that is the path to early retirement and financial independence.
Well, but what's funny is you're thinking about getting out of the rat race before you're even in the damn rat race.
Yeah, that is very true. I always knew I'm such an independent thinker. And I always knew, even at a young age, I would never be happy working for somebody else.
You've talked elsewhere about the fact that you grew up in a wealthy neighborhood and you had kind of this fear driving you, right? This maybe feeling that I'm not, I don't know if it's I'm not keeping up but you have talked about the fact that this fear of not having security where you saw security with other people around you. Tell me about that. And is that, and by the way, in this whole discussion, you haven't mentioned like mom and dad being money geeks too.
Yes. Okay. So, and I wouldn't say my mom and dad were money geeks. I learned things from them, and I learned also what not to do financially from them. And I'm glad for those lessons. I'm grateful for those lessons. But we grew up in a very wealthy county, very unrealistic bubble to grow up in. So we weren't in poverty. We always had food on the table. We were never struggling in that way. But I was playing the comparison game because of the people we were surrounded by, the mansions. I mean, to give you some context, some of the kids in my high school got brand new BMWs when they turned 16.
What, you didn't get a BMW 16?
No, and I still don't have one, and I never got a new car. So yeah, my family was not operating that way. We were not going out to eat at restaurants, let alone driving new cars or going on trips as a family. So at a pretty young age, I felt like I didn't fit in. And that's not the way you want to feel in middle school and in high school. I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to end up like everyone else struggling with money. I don't want to have to operate on a strict budget for the rest of my life. I don't want to have to borrow money from family and friends to make it to my next paycheck. I wanted to be different. And I realized that what I did then could either set me up for wealth or for poverty. So that kind of lit a fire under me. You know, I did have fears of not having enough money because that's the household I grew up in. There was never enough money. Money was always a stressor. We never knew how we were going to pay the next utility bill. And I had those fears and those limiting beliefs. And they say that fear can be paralyzing or motivating. Luckily for me, it was very motivating. And I used that fear to educate myself and build a real estate empire and have financial independence.
Yeah, they say that mom says, what comparison is the thief of joy, that it makes your life a little less joyful. I don't get this feeling that you compare yourself a lot anymore, though.
Yeah, no, not anymore. And I think people compare the wrong things. So on social media, when someone is comparing themselves to this other person who's taking trips and doing really nice kitchen renovations, they're only seeing the surface level. They're seeing somebody else's highlight reel. But is that person fulfilled? Is that person happy? Do they have meaningful relationships? Are they loved? Because those are the things that matter. And as I've accumulated more wealth, I've realized that money does not give you any of those things that I just named. Yep. So money gives you the ability to be comfortable. Yes. And I like that. I like being able to travel and do all these cool things. But when you really think about what are the things that fulfill you and are meaningful in your life, none of them are things that money can buy.
I love that. You can be rich and miserable at the same time if you choose to be.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so you saw yourself differently. You were different than a lot of the kids around you. Yet when you go to college, and I've noticed while I was doing research, your college brags about you, right? Your college loves saying that you went there. Was your college experience the same as everybody else's? And did you go get the same job that everybody else gets out of college?
No, that's hilarious. Actually, my college experience was so different than my peers because most of my peers growing up, their parents were going to be paying for their tuition for them. I was like one of the only people in my high school. I felt like that I was going to have to pay my way through school. So I graduated from high school having a lot of fears.
You were going to pay 100% of it yourself.
Yes, 100%. Room and board, everything. So I had a lot of fears because I knew what student debt could do and how crippling that could be based off of what I'd read and what I'd seen. And I was like, I don't want to graduate with debt. How am I going to do this? So I took an interview for a direct sales position with Cutco Cutlery. Have you heard of Cutco knives by any chance?
Yes. Yes. Are you going to hard close me at the end of this interview?
Yeah, I'll be selling you on the ultimate set by the end of the interview, actually.
I'll be sweating over here, right?
Yeah. And so I took this direct sales position. I was so excited because it was the first time I'd been exposed to something where the harder you work, the more money you could make. And I knew I could outwork anybody, like my drive and my ambition and my work ethic. So I started selling knives. I killed it. I crushed it. I set some sales records. I paid my way through school and I graduated debt free at the age of 20.
I want to ask about sales skills because I think sales skills, frankly, no matter what you do, are an important part of life. I feel like, you and I, every time we go out in public, we're selling ourselves to other people. When I was a financial planner, I would sell people on chasing their own dreams, right? And not giving up. So I feel like sales is this big thing, but was it just that you were a force of nature, or was there some techniques that you used or developed that you can share with the stackers out there?
Oh my gosh, there's so many techniques. I'm an introvert, first of all. So for me to be this energetic salesperson on 6 appointments a day from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. was the most emotionally draining experience of my life to this day. So it wasn't about me having this innate ability. It was about me learning how to be a good salesperson and learning the techniques and tactics. One of them, obviously, be personable. Start off by building a rapport. Don't just go straight into the sales pitch. Learn about how you can add value to the other person first and foremost. And that's something that I still use to this day. How can I add value to my audience first and foremost before asking for anything in return? That's what builds a trusting relationship. There's also other more specific tactics like, ask for the close confidently and then stop speaking. So, hey, do you want to buy this set of Cutco knives? And then stop talking. Give them a chance to reflect and respond. One of the things that we tend to do as salespeople is that's a nerve-wracking question to ask. So we'll tend to ramble on, say things that maybe we shouldn't say, and don't even give the customer a chance to respond. And then there's the, ask for the biggest sale first, or at least this is what we were taught in Cutco. Ask for the biggest set first, and then you kind of climb down the ladder from there. Hey, if this one doesn't work, what about this one? So we probably actually asked for the close 7 different times throughout the Cutco sales presentation. And we keep asking, do you want to buy this set? Do you want to buy this set? And at the end of it, they normally will have bought something. So my average order at the time, I think, was $250, and the national average was $200.
Wow. It just reminds me of, and I know this is about your story and not about mine. When I was in college, I raised money for Michigan State. So we would call, we didn't go door to door, but we did the next worst thing, which was we would call you on the phone and ask you for money. Maybe it's worse. I don't know. But there was a guy named Mark Brewer who was the best person by far working for Michigan State Development at the time. And the reason, Rachel, was exactly what you're talking about. He would always, no matter what it said, like this screen would pop up and it would say, ask this person for $100 or ask him for $250. He would always start off with President's Club, which is $1,000. Every single person he would ask for $1,000. And guess who was by far the king of bringing in money for Michigan State University? It was Mark Brewer. And when we would have him talk to other students about it, he said it was because when he got in front of people that could afford to give $1,000, he wasn't afraid. It didn't seem like a lot of money. It wasn't a big deal. It was the same pitch he'd given 100 times. So when he was actually in front of the right person, he felt incredibly comfortable. I'm thinking that had to be a similar approach to what you're talking about.
Absolutely. So building up, so for example, with Cutco, you would start with trying to sell the ultimate set, which is $2,000, right? So that's a lot of money for a knife set. And then by the time you've gone through all these different iterations, dropped down to smaller sets, by the time you ask to sell a single knife, which maybe is $70, they're like, gosh, that's so cheap. That's so little. And so you've framed their expectations correctly. And that's what we do now. Whenever I sell a new course or a new program, it's like you see these people that say that, well, the value is $10,000 and it includes all these different things, but I'm going to sell it to you today for only $497. And then it's like, wow, that seems like so much less than what the value that I'm going to get out of this program. Yeah,
that's powerful stuff. I remember my parents upstairs mom has a bathroom book that has wisdom from 8-year-olds. And one of the best ones, Rachel, is from Melissa, age 8, who says, if you want a kitty, start off by asking for a horse.
Yes, there you go. Couldn't have said it better myself. I love that. Yeah, the sales tactics that I learned are some of the most valuable things that I've learned and that have helped me throughout my life since I sold Cutco.
Another thing I know that chased you out, but I don't know how or why. I just know that when you and I were speaking briefly before this back and forth, that you said you also had a particularly abusive boss, and that must have also moved you toward independence.
Oh gosh, yes, this woman was cruel. I mean, brutal, not only to me, but to her employees, made people cry, screamed at people through the walls of the office where we could hear what was going on and the conversations that were being had. And there's this one particular moment I will never forget. I'd been working there for a few months already, so I already had the fear in me. When she walked up to the office door and came in, my heart would race and I would be scared of what was to come. That's the impact that she had on me. But she asked me for some letterhead. She's like, hey, find the letterhead, Rachel. Where's the letterhead? I'm frantically searching on the computer desktop to print something out for her. We've never used letterhead. This is the first time I'm hearing about the letterhead. So I'm frantically searching. She's behind me with her arms crossed, tapping her heel, literally just waiting right behind me. And after about 10 seconds, she walks over to this bookshelf, this dusty bookshelf, pulls out the letterhead, brings it back over to me, holds it in front of my face, like 2 inches from my face. And she goes, what do I even pay you for? And it was just nasty. Like what an awful way to be treated. And I just remember my gut sinking, and I'm a smart, confident person, but she made me feel like the dumbest person alive. And I just had so many issues with my self-esteem and working for her. And it was just such an emotionally abusive environment. She did make me cry a couple times. And I do remember one time looking in the mirror in the bathroom as I was trying to clean up and thinking to myself, I am never going to be trapped in an environment like this again. I'm never going to be trapped in a job because of money or because of financial constraints. I'm going to find a way to get out of this. And I remember thinking that, and that was like 12 months before I bought my first rental property.
Wow. Talk about motivation.
Yeah. And luckily not all of my bosses have been like that. I've had some incredible bosses, but even the bosses who nitpicked me for leaving at 4:30 or 4:45 every day, even though I got in at 7:30, it's just like, really, you're measuring my value to the company by the hours I put in and not by the results that I'm getting. And so there's just things like that where I was not made to be working for another person. I needed to have my independence and my freedom and my flexibility.
I want to talk about this word retired in a second, but a lot of people, when they introduce you, they say that you retired at age 27. And I have to guess that there came a time, and I don't know, Rachel, if this was just mathematics and you were waiting for the mathematics to work, or if there was a trigger and you're like, you know what, I don't care what it is. I can make work starting right now. But do you remember where you were when you said it's time to walk away from, quote, work, where you were at that moment?
Absolutely. It was actually 2018 when I came to that realization. And my husband and I had this goal of getting to $10,000 a month in passive income. Okay. And I mean like passive profit.
So that part was math.
Yes. And we got to that number because I think we were spending something like $6,000 a month on living expenses, which has creeped up over time. And we just wanted to have enough buffer room to cover that and still be able to save money or just have a little bit extra in case we overspent that month. So 10K was the number. We actually hit that in 2018, and that more than replaced my full-time income. I never made six figures from a job or career. So that more than replaced my full-time income. And by 2018, I could have quit. The problem was, when it came down to actually quitting, it was really hard to go through with it because it was this scary thing. Obviously, I questioned myself because I was walking away from a lucrative corporate finance career, something where I could potentially have become the CFO at this company within 10 or 15 years.
So it feels like security, right? It feels like security.
Yes. And it was, am I crazy to be walking away from this? And also projecting my own fears onto my family and friends, because my family and friends were overwhelmingly supportive. But I remember constantly thinking like, well, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think I'm crazy? And none of them thought I was crazy. They were all like proud or envious, like jealous, but in like a nice way that I could do this. And they were like, man, I wish I could do this. So they were all very supportive. I was just projecting my own fears onto, what other people might think of me. So it took me an entire year to actually go through with quitting my job. I quit in 2019, and it is definitely one of the best things that I've ever done.
You haven't looked back since.
No, I have not looked back since. If anything, I should have quit sooner. But I think most people have the opposite problem, or maybe they quit too soon. They take a leap of faith, hoping that the net will appear. They don't have any income streams to fall back on. They don't have a huge savings account to fall back on. And I don't recommend doing it that way, because you don't want to be operating out of a place of panic and desperation when it comes to starting a business. So my husband and I were very intentional about, let's get to 10K a month in income. Let's fully replace your full-time income before you quit. And once we were able to do that, it wasn't a financial fear at all. It was just my own personal fears.
You had enough cushion then that financially you didn't have to worry about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm really not a fan of this word retired. And I also, by the way, don't like the argument, right? Because you and I see this all online all the time. Are they really retired? Are they making money off their blog or whatever? It's just stupidity. But that said, you really aren't retired. I see you all over the place. Like, what's your definition of this word retired, or definition of what you are now?
Yeah. And maybe I should stop using that word, because I use retired and financially independent interchangeably. So to me, when I say retired, I mean, I'm financially independent. It doesn't mean that I'm not working. And that's the big distinction, because a lot of people will be like, well, Rachel, you're not retired. You're still working. And I'm like, well, yeah, I love to work. For me, it's now about working when, where, and if I want. So our passive income is up to 15, 20K a month now. I certainly don't need to keep working, and neither does my husband. But I am so fortunate to have built a business that I am so passionate about, I'm so fulfilled by. It's not about the money anymore. It's that I just want to make a greater impact and help more women and young people with money management. So that's what I spend my time doing.
Let's dive into it then, into the tactics of what you do. And I know this is the part that excites both you and I as nerds, is the way I understand it. Your goal is to really short circuit this idea of having a couple $1 million and using the 4% rule and living off of $80,000 a year, and finding a quicker way to get there. And by doing it, by creating these income streams. But as I've heard you talk about this in other places, I think to myself, you still have to have a portfolio of houses that's worth a fair amount of money to be able to fuel that income stream, to create that income stream. I mean, when you had 30 something houses, I would have to imagine that was millions of dollars worth of real estate.
Yes. And it was 38 doors, not houses. So it was 6 buildings.
Gotcha. Okay.
You're correct. But the difference between saving up $2.5 million as a nest egg and having $2.5 million worth of real estate is leverage. It's so difficult. And this is why I talk about the nest egg theory, which is this theory that we accumulate this nest egg, $2 million by age 65, so that we can retire and live off of that for the rest of our lives. There are so many problems with that, and I can go into detail on that. But I have personally thought that it's easier to generate passive income streams. So I could build a portfolio of $2.5 million worth of real estate with only $500,000. by putting a 20% down payment down and then leveraging the rest. Whereas if I'm trying to save up $2.5 million, I have to actually have $2.5 million in the bank. So you can get there a lot faster with real estate investing, and just the idea of passive income in and of itself. Saving $2 million by working for 40 years, working a 9-to-5 job is difficult to do. I think it's overwhelming to think you have to save $2 million by age 65. Like, I don't know many multimillionaires. So when I heard about this concept of passive income, which is recurring income that requires little to no effort to maintain, I thought to myself, I think it's a lot easier to create $5,000 or $6,000 or $8,000 a month in passive income. And the epiphany I had a few years ago is that once your passive income exceeds your living expenses, you're retired, you're financially independent. And so that's what we started working towards.
Let me dive into a couple things there. Number one, you and I both know, Rachel, that people hear the word leverage and they get nervous. When you say leverage, you act like, no, this is the answer. I mean, I could just hear it in your voice. Nope, this is the answer. Talk some people off the leverage ledge on why this is great and not horrible.
Yeah. And because a lot of people are like, well, what about risk? You got to account for risk. And yes, of course, if you are leveraged, if you're taking on a down payment and leveraging to buy a real estate investment property, that's higher risk, right? What if the bank calls your loan due? Then what do? There is more risk involved. There's more liability when you're dealing with tenants. But I think there's a difference in being leveraged and being over leveraged. Being over leveraged is what you want to avoid. And if you buy too many properties, only putting 3.5% or 5% down by doing house hacking or whatever other method, you run the risk of being over leveraged and going underwater on the mortgages on your property, where if the market goes down, suddenly your properties are worth less than what you owe on them. So that's a risky position to be in. However, with our real estate portfolio, we've put 20 to 25% down on every single property that we own. And from the lender's point of view, that's very safe. That's a good amount of leverage. So I don't feel over leveraged. I don't feel at risk. I run so many scenarios when I buy a property to make sure that I'm not going to be in trouble. So I knew going into COVID last year, when everyone lost a lot of rental income, I knew that I could afford to lose 50% of rent and still break even on my properties.
Oh.
And I knew that because I run a break even analysis before I purchase a property, because I always want to understand how much rent would it take? How much would I have to reduce rent by just to break even on this property? And then I know what my wiggle room is, what my margin for error is. 50% is an enormous margin of error. And so that's what happened last April. We lost essentially 50% of our rents. We went from making $10,000 a month in rental profit to making $0 last April 2020.
It all came true.
Yes, it all came true. And the only reason I wasn't completely panicked that month is because I had all these other income streams keeping me afloat. Because we believe in income diversification. How can we have passive income coming in from as many sources as possible? Now, after April 2020, things picked back up immediately and we're totally back to normal. So it was only a 1-month thing, but that's how you can be safe with leverage and protect yourself as an investor.
We talked to Alan Corey, who I think you know, a few weeks ago about his take on real estate. And it sounds like you agree with him, Rachel, that having more doors, using leverage to get more doors gives you that diversification. So if part of the rent goes away, it all doesn't go away.
Yes, exactly. And I will say the only reason we scaled from 0 to 38 doors within 2 years is because we were able to smartly use leverage.
Are all of your properties multi-unit properties, or do you also like single homes?
The only single family homes we own are ones that we used to live in as our primary residences. Okay. So we've never purposely or intentionally bought a single family home as an investment. I prefer multifamily because you're already building in diversification in a way. So with the single family house, if you have one tenant and the tenant's not paying or you're going through an eviction, you don't have any money coming in. In a quad, a fourplex, if you have one tenant that's doing that, but the other 3 are paying rent, chances are you're still making money or at least breaking even. So I think it's just a less risky way to approach real estate investing.
You also mentioned earlier that you were taking care of the houses yourself. You were self-managing them. Did you do that to get experience, or did you do that to save money? Why did you manage it yourself?
It was both. It was equal parts both. We wanted to have the experience of knowing exactly how this worked, because we knew that there would be a time where we would hire a property manager, and we wanted to have the knowledge to correctly manage them and to understand, well, actually, I know that I can fill a vacancy within 48 hours. So I know it's possible. So why aren't you able to do that? Why is it taking you 4 weeks to fill a vacancy? So I think it's really helpful to have that experience. And also, of course, it saved us a ton of money starting out as well, so that we could purchase the next house even faster.
When you made $10,000 of income coming in, because you use leverage, you have a loan due every month, right? So is that $10,000 after the loan payment?
Yes, that's after. So that when I say $10,000 a month in passive income, really, I mean passive profit. That's after the mortgage, after all the expenses are paid. That was what we were taking home.
It's funny, you're a real estate investor, but just before you hit record, you told me that you guys are nomads right now. You don't own a house that you live in yourself right now.
Yeah, we're homeless. We don't have a house to go back to. So we're actually spending the rest of the year traveling, going from Airbnb to Airbnb all over the West Coast.
I did that last year, Rachel, and it was so damn fun. But you're in wine country right now.
We are in wine country. We're in Sonoma, and I can't wait to go on some of these wine tours.
that could be problematic, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't have a lot of work booked in the next 3 weeks because I know I'm going to be drinking a lot of wine instead.
That's good strategy, right? And there's your flexibility, right? You don't have to worry about it. You can go do what you want, and you still have money coming in every month.
Yes, the beauty of passive income. I'll never forget. I was traveling one time with my sisters in Spain, and this was like January 2020. And I happened to just look at my book sales the next morning. We slept overnight. I looked at my book sales the next morning and I'd sold 500 books overnight.
Oh my God.
And it was something like $2,000. And I was like, I remember it clicking for me like, wow, this is literal passive income. I made that money while I was sleeping, and just one of the coolest moments.
You go over in your books, you've got 5 different ways to do passive income. There's lots of tips. You've got your Amazon bestseller, Money Honey. And I love this title, by the way, Passive Income, Aggressive Retirement. Just absolutely awesome title. You also teach people. You have a fantastic TikTok presence. I can't dance, so I don't have a TikTok presence. Tell everybody the best way to get a hold of you.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, I can be followed on TikTok and Insta at Money Honey Rachel. Both of my books are on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audio. And what I'd love to do for your listeners is give them my passive income starter kit for free. So if anyone wants to download that, you can go to moneyhoneyrachel.com/bonus.
Awesome. And you know what? If you're walking the dog or on your commute, for those of you that still commute, we've got you covered. We will have that link and links to all of Rachel's stuff on our show notes page at stackingbenjamins.com. And also for those of you that get our guide, we'll also have them in the guide. Rachel, thanks a ton for hanging out with us and talking passive income and telling your story. It's so fascinating. I just can't believe you were a money nerd that young. That just still cracks me up.
Yes. And thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.